Yeah, and it's like the plunder from the poor is in your houses.
Mm-hmm.
It's so funny, like to picture that happening. Like
Mm-hmm.
we're the leaders of God's holy people, and it's like, really? Then
Yeah.
how come all their stuff is in your back closet? Like,
Yeah, it's like your kid's bicycle's missing, and then you like go to one of the Supreme Court justices' house, and you see
it's like in his
his
shed.
grandson riding around the driveway on your bicycle. You're like, what? Welcome to Biblocus, where the Bible intersects with your life. I'm Timothy.
And I'm Caleb.
And you're listening to Bible Discussions, the forum where we explore biblical topics that are relevant to your life. So today we're starting a new series about the sayings of the wise, which are found in Proverbs beginning in chapter 22. And there are 30 sayings in the initial sayings of the wise. So we're going to start by introducing them and covering the first saying on this episode. And this is the third series we've had on Bible Discussions. Our first one, if you've been with us since the beginning, you'll know, was teaching you through the Old Testament to learn more about Jesus Christ and who he is and why you need him. And then we went into the 10 Commandments and did about 12 sessions on the 10 Commandments. I don't know how we managed to do that, but and now we're moving into some of the wisest sayings of the ancient world that were collected by King Solomon or someone who put them in the book of Proverbs. Now, this is basically going to be some practical advice for living that you can use to keep yourself from straying, keep yourself from getting into trouble. Some of the wisest sayings that have ever been collected. So we're going to start by reading the introduction from the Bible in Proverbs 22, verses 17 through 21. It says, "Pay attention and turn your ear to the sayings of the wise. Apply your heart to what I teach, for it is pleasing when you keep them in your heart and have all of them ready on your lips. So that your trust may be in the Lord, I teach you today, even you. Have I not written 30 sayings for you, sayings of counsel and knowledge, teaching you to be honest and to speak the truth, so that you bring back truthful reports to those who you serve?" So you can hear in that introduction, I think, Caleb, kind of echoes of the 10 Commandments, echoes of the Shema, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, when it says have them ready on your lips, I thought of that specifically.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Speak of them as you walk along the way, as you sit together.
Like be ready to talk about it. Or even think of like Peter saying, always be ready to give a witness.
Yeah.
To give a reason for the hope that is in you.
And he says to keep them in your heart too, which, the Shema is loving the Lord your God with all your heart. And then the 10 Commandments, right? He talks about how they'll help you put your trust in the Lord, which is the first couple commandments are all about trusting God alone. And then he says it'll help you speak the truth, which is also one of the 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
So good advice just right off there from the beginning.
Right.
And that's the introduction. So that's what we're going to try to look at is what are these sayings of the wise? If you've never contemplated them, why haven't you contemplated what the Bible says are the 30 wisest sayings of all time? And so we're going to start off with number 1. So let's read it. It's from Proverbs 22, verses 22 and 23.
"Do not exploit the poor because they are poor, and do not crush the needy in court. For the Lord will take up their case and will exact life for life."
So this is the lead off of all the wisest things that were ever said is don't oppress the poor.
Yeah.
And so I think what it's saying is things aren't always the way they appear, right? You might foolishly think, because that's the whole point of a proverb, right? Is here's what a foolish person would do. Here's what a wise person would do instead. A foolish person would say, here's a poor person. They have no advocacy. They have no agency. I'll just exploit them because what can they do about it?
Yeah, and that's like you said, that's the first of the sayings here, which that's the first place Solomon's mind goes, or whoever's. That's priority 1.
Yeah, and as a king, you don't want to be in a kingdom where everybody takes advantage of everybody that's less fortunate than they are. I mean, that would be a lousy kingdom. So as a king, you have a vested interest in people knowing this.
Yeah, the king is the ultimate authority. He's the ultimate judge. And if everybody is doing that, like when Moses is struggling to keep up with all
Yeah.
the complaints and the judgments that all the people need, and Jethro tells him appoint trustworthy men
Hmm.
to delegate that authority to. If none of them are trustworthy, it's all on you
Yeah.
as the king.
And that's the thing. Solomon, or whoever the king might have been at the time in Israel, would have known that I'm going to be the one who has to give agency to these people if I can't
Yeah.
teach people to treat each other properly. And the thing is that appearances aren't always the truth. And that's the idea behind this proverb, is there is agency for the poor. It's either a judge, a king, or God himself, as it says right here in this proverb, right? It says the Lord will take up their case
Hmm.
and he'll exact life for life. So we've seen this before.
Right. And that life for life is like, we keep running into this, like everything, all the commandments, it seemed like all got compared. If you break the commandment, it was compared to violence at some
Mm-hmm.
point. And this is the same thing here, right?
Yeah.
It's bringing that into mind that you're oppressing them. And again, it talks about murder here, or at least this
Mhm.
is a very raw justice, eye for an eye, life for life.
Yeah. It makes me think of a story in our neighborhood here when I was a kid. I guess I was in high school or college. Um, a new house was built, and unlike most of the houses in the neighborhood, they built a big brick mailbox. You know, one of those ones with the arched brick on top
Hmm.
and the mailbox embedded in it. And somebody thought, "Oh, this is a great idea. I'm going to put like a bomb, a quarter stick of dynamite inside there, and blow up their nice fancy brick mailbox." Who knows why? Um, but again, it's this idea of doing things and thinking that the person that you're doing it to has no agency to do anything about it.
Yeah.
So this was done. The mailbox exploded. What the people who put the firecracker, the quarter stick of dynamite inside there, didn't realize was that the people who had moved into that house were the parents of the state attorney general of the state of Tennessee, and so they considered this a credible threat against the family of the attorney general. So they were like, we've got to find out who did this. It's probably somebody he's put in jail or, whatever. And so they like spared no expense. The FBI, the TBI, everybody was investigating this thing, and they tracked these guys down. And it turned out to be like some guy in his 20s who had gotten a couple of high school kids. Well, let's blow this mailbox up, hold my beer a minute and watch this, And so he blew it up just as like a fun, stunt to do with these young kids. Then he ended up getting arrested for, assaulting the family, the attorney general, for corrupting minors and all this stuff. And they like threw the book at the guy. So, if you don't know the agency of the person you're going to try to commit a crime against, then you need to do better research.
Yeah. I mean, there are like an infinite number of like folk tales as well that have basically that same plot. Somebody
Mhm.
takes advantage of somebody, and then it turns out that they they know the king, or they know the sorcerer or some powerful person in the story. And then
Yeah.
we love these stories. We like to see it all come back on the head of the guy who was acting unjustly,
Yeah.
because we're like, yeah, now you're going to get yours.
But you know why this isn't a joke though, is look at the name that's used in verse 23.
Yeah, the Lord will take up their case.
The Lord. And we know from our study of the 10 commandments that you don't use the name of the Lord in vain, right? So this isn't just like a nice aphorism or something like that. I mean, this is serious. Like this proverb would not be written as it is with the name of the Lord in there if it wasn't deadly serious.
Right.
And that's what it says in the last part of that verse, right? It's going to be life for life.
Yeah, he takes it seriously.
Mm-hmm. It's like in our country, the highest court is the Supreme Court. And if your case goes to the Supreme Court, I mean, like this is going to be the final decision.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this proverb is calling you to do, is like, think about this, okay? Before you make your trivial decision as a fool, be a wise person and make a more thoughtful decision. Think in the long run, who's going to have advocacy for this person that you're oppressing? And it's going to be God, and it's not going to turn out good for you. It's like if you knew that whatever decision you made today was going to be promoted all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they were going to pass judgment on whether it was a smart idea or dumb idea.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, let's just not do it. Right. And so, and in this case, think that the person that you're acting against has as their advocate the Lord God Almighty.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to be pleading the case for the opponent's side at the Supreme Court, of all, the universe.
Yeah, I was telling you before this, back when we had done our studies on the Psalms in the Old Testament series, because we did 4 separate Psalms, in preparation for that, I listened to an audiobook of C.S. Lewis's thoughts on the Psalms, which is pretty short. It was just a few hours. And one of the things he picks up on is this constant pattern. This is just in the Psalms, but it's here and elsewhere in the Bible too, of like expecting the Lord's judgment, looking forward to it. And I think we tend to think of it as, I don't know, I don't want that because I've screwed up, so he's going to judge me. But if you're identifying him as your advocate, if you're relying on him, or if you're oppressed, then you're relying on him, then you are looking forward to his judgment. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a big question of faith there, right? Because if you think if it's just like a raw materialism, like all you believe in is the natural world, then this is all there is. You might as well just get everything you can at any cost. But if you have a belief in God and you really believe it, then you actually do believe there's a judge or an advocate after that. And this is going to have consequences.
Yeah. Well, we saw over and over again in the minor prophets how God's judgment actually worked to get the people to return to him.
Yeah.
We saw in Joel, for instance, how the plague of locusts was used to describe the total devastation of a locust swarm that we talked about there, and how it just wipes everything out. I mean, it takes out the crops, it takes out the livestock and everything, because there's nothing for anything to eat. And so the entire economy's wrecked. You can't even make offerings to God in the sanctuary because there's nothing to offer him.
Yeah.
And it was almost like God did it all on purpose to say, good, because I'm tired of you guys bringing your lying offerings into my sanctuary when you really don't care. And then eventually you're just left looking at yourself going, well, I don't have anything left but me. And God's like, right. Why don't you give that to me?
Yeah.
And so sometimes the judgment, it can be good.
Yeah. It's always good.
Yeah. No, well, yeah. I mean, the devastation of it, though, I mean.
Right. It can be what you need.
Yeah, exactly what you needed. And but some people don't survive it.
Yeah. Well, and that's true in a normal, like, earthly justice system as well. It's actually good for a person to pay for their crimes in some way.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they're not going to, if there's no consequences, it's like there's the end of a comedy video by Studio C where it's like, it's a very goofy sketch and then the narrator says, and so, they had no repercussions whatsoever for their behavior. There were no lasting consequences whatsoever. I'm probably just going to do it again then if there are no consequences.
Yeah. Well, speaking of consequences, consequences for oppressing the poor, right? You can just do a glance through the Old Testament prophets and figure out that was a big reason why Israel was wiped off the map by God, because of the way they were treating the poor. And so he is their advocate. This proverb, if anybody had been paying attention to it in the Old Testament times, would have saved them from losing the entire country. So a good example of this would be like Isaiah 3, verses 13 through 15, which says, "The Lord takes his place in court. He rises to judge the people. The Lord enters into judgment against the elders and leaders of his people. It is you who have ruined my vineyard. The plunder from the poor is in your houses. What do you mean by crushing my people and grinding the faces of the poor, declares the Lord Almighty." So this is just a strange picture. It's like the leaders of the country, like their houses are full of the possessions of the poor people that they're oppressing.
Those are the people that he judges, the elders and leaders, the ones who've been judging the country in an earthly sense.
Yeah.
Now he's judging them. Yeah, and it's like the plunder from the poor is in your houses, It's so funny, like, to picture that happening. Like,
Mm-hmm.
We're the leaders of God's holy people. And he's like, really? Then
Yeah.
how come all their stuff is in your back closet? Like,
Yeah, it's like your kid's bicycle's missing, and then you like go to one of the Supreme Court justices' house, and you see
It's like
you
in
see
his
his
shed.
grandson riding around the driveway on your bicycle. You're like, what?
yeah. It's like that story about Jesus telling us how we should pray with the woman who keeps going to the corrupt judge over and over again,
Mm-hmm.
even though she knows he's corrupt because it's the only way to hear her case.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you do?
The very judges who are supposed to be blind to prejudice in their judgments are robbing the poor.
Yeah.
And so it's a sad picture. Well, that's just getting started here. Like, so, we could look at this one passage and say, well, none of us should be oppressing others to benefit ourselves, okay, by using our authority to take stuff from them. But this is just the beginning. Isaiah in chapter 11, he talks about the Messiah and how the Messiah is going to come and fix all this. So in Isaiah 11, 1-9, it says,
A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. From his roots, a branch will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and of might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord, and he will delight in the fear of the Lord. He will not judge by what he sees with his eyes or decide by what he hears with his ears, but with righteousness he will judge the needy. With justice he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth. With the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. Righteousness will be his belt, and faithfulness the sash around his waist. The wolf will live with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the goat, the calf and the lion and the yearling together, and a little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear, their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. The infant will play near the cobra's den, and the young child will put its hand into the viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea.
Yeah, I think it's amazing in the beginning of that where he talks about how he's not going to judge by what he sees and what he hears. I think that's exactly what this proverb is saying. Like, don't go by initial appearances. Say, oh, look, a poor person, I can oppress them and get away with it, because you're not thinking things through. And the promise of Messiah is that he's going to come and judge righteously. He's going to judge based on, the inner man, not on the outward appearance of things.
Yeah, and there's so much of an emphasis on the knowledge of the Lord as well. It's in the last verse we read there that the whole earth will be covered in it. And then back at the start of the passage, it talks about the Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, on this branch, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, of counsel and might, and of knowledge and fear of the Lord. And what is the fear of the Lord? The beginning of wisdom.
Oh, yes, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you said it backwards. Usually it's like the beginning of wisdom is fear of the Lord.
Yeah.
But anyway. Or no, I have it backwards.
Yeah. Well, it's okay. Maybe you're just not knowledgeable.
I'm not as wise. That's why I need these sayings to help me. All right. So, yeah, we'll notice in this passage how the oppressed are going to be exalted and how everything's kind of leveled. Everything's kind of leveled. Like the predator is sitting down with the prey. Mm-hmm. The child is the leader. The poor, the prey, the innocent, they're all okay now. Like where you would think they would be vulnerable, they're not. Mm-hmm. And so righteousness, it says, is going to reign, and wickedness is going to be slain. So that's kind of a cool picture. He's going to judge by righteousness, and that judgment is going to be against wickedness. So it's interesting, I think, too, that Jesus chose to lead off his preaching ministry with the words of Isaiah. Mm-hmm. And their words very similar to this. So in Luke 4:14-21, it says, Jesus returned to Galilee in the power of the Spirit, and news about him spread through the whole countryside. He was teaching in their synagogues, and everyone praised him. He went to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, and on the Sabbath day, he went into the synagogue, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him. Unrolling it, he found the place where it is written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Then he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of everyone in the synagogue were fastened on him. He began by saying to them, "Today this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing."
Yeah. There's an emphasis, obviously, on helping the poor or the oppressed, the needy there, and
Yeah.
that's how he publicly announces his ministry.
Yeah, it's cool. It's the way he leads, and he's basically saying that this reign of righteousness that we talked about in that last passage out of Isaiah is beginning,
Mm-hmm.
and now he's out in chapter 61 now, or what we would call chapter 61 of Isaiah, where he quoted that, and he was the advocate for the poor. Now he's arrived, so this is the answer to that Messiah that we were just talking about earlier in Isaiah 11, that promised Messiah, that branch that was coming, a branch of Jesse. And now he's here, and he's saying it's fulfilled right now. And he decides to lead the same way that the sayings of the wise leads off, with saying number 1, don't oppress the poor, right? The poor have agency that's
Right.
not perceived at face value.
Yeah, but they have God as their advocate. I wanted to bring up too. I should have brought this up at the beginning when we did like the intro there. Back in verse 2 of Proverbs 22, it says, "The rich and poor have this in common: the Lord is the maker of them all, and the judge of them all." Right. But that's who Jesus is, and that's the context that he comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Right, is to judge them all, and to judge with righteousness, like it said, righteousness around his belt. Earlier in Isaiah. And of course, the Jews, because there was an oral society, the synagogue was where the word was read aloud. Most of them couldn't have read, at least not sort of a high level literature like that, or wouldn't have had the resources to have their own scrolls. So they're just hearing the scroll of Isaiah read aloud, and like you were saying, no chapters,
Yeah.
So the whole thing is just kind of there in their context, in their mind.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those verses we just read out of Isaiah are going to be, in their minds, being referenced.
Yeah,
when he quotes any part of it,
the whole context would be. And so, the whole context of this saying of the wise that we're talking about is that there's a hidden agency for the poor that you can't ignore when you choose how you're going to act, and that hidden agency is actually, as the proverb tells us, is the Lord, but as this passage tells us, that the advocate of the poor is Jesus Christ himself.
Mm-hmm.
And like Caleb said, the agent of creation as well.
Yeah. There's a lot of like legal imagery used here and elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's one of the key ways that the Bible teaches us to think about our relationship with God.
Yeah.
And we I know I brought this up in a past episode, maybe it was Job, that the word Satan means the accuser. Like Satan's in the courtroom too, as the accusing lawyer, the prosecutor. Yeah. Jesus is the defendant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So getting back to this theme of, okay, if you ignore saying number 1, you oppress the poor, there's going to be consequences. And in the case of ancient Israel, the consequences were the loss of their nation. We looked at Isaiah, we looked at a few passages. We're going to look at Jeremiah here. Jeremiah 5:26 and 20 through 29.
"Among my people are the wicked, who lie in wait like men who snare birds, and like those who set traps to catch people. Like cages full of birds, their houses are full of deceit. They've become rich and powerful and have grown fat and sleek. Their evil deeds have no limit. They do not seek justice. They do not promote the cause of the fatherless. They do not defend the just cause of the poor. Shall I not punish them for this, declares the Lord? Should I not avenge myself on such a nation as this?" Which is, again, the nation of Israel.
Yeah. Yeah, God's chosen people. And he's like, I'm not going to spare even my chosen people.
Right.
So that should be a stark warning, to any fool who's thinking about oppressing a poor person and that they have no agency to realize that it's going to cost you everything.
Yeah. And I mean, this gets us back to, like, we just recently did our episode on coveting, because we just finished the 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
Right. And we read this exact passage out of Jeremiah 22:15-17.
It says, "Does it make you a king to have more and more cedar? Did not your father have food and drink? He did what was right and just, so all went well with him. He defended the cause of the poor and needy, and so all went well. Is that not what it means to know me, declares the Lord? But your eyes and your heart are set only on dishonest gain, on shedding innocent blood, and on oppression and extortion."
Yeah. And we just read that. Like, are you more of a king because you have a better palace? You have more cedar. You know, I think there's a lot of historical applications here. I think this is probably the best time to bring them up. Think about, like, the French Revolution. And then some of it is myth. Like, Marie Antoinette never said, "Let them eat cake," about the poor. But she did live in a palace and have these ridiculous, elaborate hairstyles and have her own little playhouse where she pretended to be a servant, like, just for fun because she was bored. It's like, so some of it's blown out of proportion, but there was injustice, right? The upper classes were living like kings and the poor were scraping the dirt. Like, if you've ever read Tale of Two Cities, you know, there's a nobleman in that novel who says they should eat grass. The poor can eat grass. And then when the revolution comes, it's pretty violent, but they put him on a stake and stuff grass in his mouth, you know? And it's like, whether or not that's really true, in a historical sense, it's very true in a moral sense. Like, that is where this is leading. If you're oppressing the poor and taking all the wealth for yourself, like, and I know for us as Americans, we might think, well, I'm just like kind of an average middle class American. Well, then you're among the wealthiest people on the earth, so
Yeah.
it still is going to apply to us. And then you can think of other historical examples, like, you know, let's say the Winter Revolution in Russia in 1917, where the whole state becomes communist, and they kill the Tsar and his family. Very similar situation there, although Tsar Nicholas was actually looking to reform, but, you know, they didn't have any patience left. And also, I've been learning recently about, like, the time of the Reformation, and you have, like, the Peasants' Revolt, which was a really shocking time. It really split people into camps on the Protestant side. And, you know, Luther received some flack for siding with the nobles, and they're like, "Oh, I thought you were a man of the people." And he's like, "Well, read the Bible. It says submit to the authorities, submit to the rulers." And then but he doesn't spare the rulers either. He tells them, if you oppress the poor, God will take up their cause. Now, he might have been watching this episode when
Probably.
he wrote that.
Everybody else has.
I mean, all through history, you can see this happen. Basically, anytime there's a revolution or civil war of some kind, this is playing a part. You know, or maybe, like, you enslave an entire class of people based on the color of their skin, and then you know, there's a war that tears the nation apart. I don't know, something like that.
Well, when you were talking about A Tale of Two Cities and the guy eating grass, it reminded me of this Jeremiah passage here, because it talks about that the king's father had food to eat.
Yeah,
You know, but he said he didn't go around oppressing the poor. He took up the cause of the needy,
and all went well.
and all went well with him. And so, you know, that's the call to us, is like, look, be satisfied with your daily bread, you know, and what's more important is your relationship with God, your relationship with other people. If you have enough to eat, then spend the rest of your time focusing on relationships.
Yeah, just like that parable of the guy who tears down his barns to build new ones. Like, I've got all this wealth, so I'll just stack it up even higher.
Yeah.
For what? To watch it rot?
Yeah, the next day you're dead. So it's weird though, right? Because we talk about, okay, so kings should be concerned about the needs of the poor. You know, they shouldn't be concerned about the wealthy. Yet when we think about a king, or when we think about our rulers, you know, our leaders, we think about them, well, they should have the best of everything. They like, we don't sit there and think, well, the president, when he forms his cabinet, like we have a new president in the United States right now, he just formed his cabinet. We don't go, well, I hope he gets all the poorest people he can find in the country to make up his cabinet. We think, oh, I'm sure they'll be the richest, smartest, most accomplished,
Powerful.
powerful people in the
Yeah,
world.
those are the kinds of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, we do have, in recent American politics, there is an interesting kind of dynamic there, because I think for a long time people thought of the Democratic Party as the party of the poor. That seems to have kind of shifted. Things are maybe in the balance. There's some kind of a realignment happening, because in the last election you had like the Republican candidate going to the McDonald's drive-through and driving a garbage truck. And whether or not that's genuine, he at least seems to get this. Like, I need to at least appear to be on their side.
Yeah. So we don't think of things that way, though. Like, we tend to think of them as get the wealthiest, smartest people, and make them your.
Well, certainly he didn't appoint the McDonald's workers to his cabinet.
Yeah, and I think that was part of the problem that Jeremiah was saying. Like, look, you build a big cedar palace for yourself, and you stock it up with all these courtiers and all these people, and you think that you're putting the best things there, but you are oppressing the poor in order to do it. You're doing it on the backs of the common people that have to pay for all the cedar and everything that builds this big palace for your court, for you to hold court.
And that's the difference between what man values and what God values.
Yeah.
God does value the people. It's there's another story I wanted to bring up. This is the story of Saint Lawrence, who lived in the mid 200s AD. And under there was often Roman persecution of Christians. It wasn't always just feeding to the lions 24/7 for 300 years. There were kind of spurts of intense persecution, and one of them came under the Emperor Valerian in 258. He decreed that he wanted all bishops, priests, and deacons rounded up and killed. And Lawrence was a young man who had just been appointed a deacon, specifically in Rome, over the church's finances and treasury. And so he's captured, and the emperor, he knows he's responsible for the treasury, so he tells him, okay, you've got 3 days to gather up all of the treasures of the church, all the wealth of the church, and hand it over. So Lawrence spends the next 3 days instead giving the wealth of the church out to all the poor. And this sounds exactly like the parable of the shrewd manager. You're familiar with that, where Jesus says, a manager was accused of poor management, so his master calls him in, and he's like, "What is this? You got to give me an account of everything, and I'm going to fire you." And he thinks, "Uh-oh." So he goes around to all of the debtors who owe his master money, and he says, "What's your debt for? Yeah, just cut it in half. We'll rewrite it, and we'll cut it in half." Well, he briefly has the authority to do that, and the way you've always taught that is he realized people are more valuable than money. So I need to go and invest in people. Then that's exactly what St. Lawrence did. And then he comes to the emperor, and he doesn't bring any money. He brings a procession of poor and crippled and says, "These are the treasures of the church." And then the emperor didn't like that and had him killed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the way it is with our elites sometimes, right? They want to surround themselves with other elites. And why is that? Because they feel like, they have more to offer me than people who aren't elite like me. And so Jesus had something to say about that in Luke 14, verses 12 and 14.
Then Jesus said to his host, keep in mind, he's being hosted when he gives this, so that's funny. "When you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, or your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and so you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." You know the movie Amazing Grace about the William Wilberforce, who was the main Wilberforce behind pushing through the abolition of slavery in the British Empire. He was a generous guy, a little bit of a kind of a radical. And in the movie, he always has, like, whenever he comes back to his actual estate, there's always like a bunch of homeless people in there getting dinner from the cook. And he's always coming in and saying, "Oh, I got more people coming in. We have to prepare more food for his poor cook. But that's what I picture is like you just have a stream of homeless people coming through.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's about investing in others, right? It's not about our personal gain. And so Jesus is saying is if you're generous so that you can have it multiplied back around to you, you're doing it for the wrong reason. And if you are that way, you would only pick people who could somehow be generous back toward you.
Yeah.
And so do things for the right reasons, not for the rich reward, I think is what he's
That kind
saying.
of plays off of that idea we developed. This is back we discovered this back when we did the study on Proverbs originally, but we brought it up a few more times in the series there on the Old Testament. That idea of that cycle, like in Revelation when they're giving all wisdom, honor, glory, and power to God. It's like He also blesses you with all of those things,
Mm-hmm.
but it's on a cycle. As soon as you try to cut it off and treat yourself as the end goal, I'm just going to amass it all here, then He cuts it off. You have to be giving it back to Him.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. You have to think about too, like, why would you want to hang around with a bunch of people who are only thinking of their own gain anyways?
Well,
Like
we all know the saying about two businessmen. What's a business meeting? Two guys trying to take advantage of each other at the same time as hard as they possibly can.
Yeah.
That's the nice way of putting it. So why would you invite all of those people over?
Yeah. I mean, because you're only thinking of your own personal gain. And you don't care about them. You're thinking, well, if I can undercut them, then I'll get more out of this deal than they do.
Yeah.
I would like encourage you to think about Ebenezer Scrooge and what he learned in his life, right? It is like, if you look at that Dickens story, what did he do his whole life but just pile up riches for himself?
Mm-hmm.
And when he got to what looked like the end of his life there for a while, he didn't have any friends. And all he had was his possessions,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the ghosts take him through the reliving his life,
Yeah.
The Ghost of Christmas Past does anyway, and he's doing the exact opposite of what we're talking about. Like he's not investing in people or relationships at all.
Yeah.
You watch all of his relationships fall apart. When he's young, he's got all these friends, and he works for Mr. Fezziwig, right?
Yeah.
Who's super generous, throws them parties and stuff. He's an awesome boss. And then by the end of his life, he's the worst boss.
Yeah, he's in love with a girl, but he's in love with his career more.
Yeah, and he lets her go.
Yeah, and you kind of watch helplessly with him because he's looking at the past and he can't change any of it, and you're seeing how it just sort of ebbs all away from him, right, over time. And there's a passage in James that's related to this. It says. It's James 1, verses 9 through 11. It says, believers in humble circumstances ought to take pride in their high position, but the rich should take pride in their humiliation, since they will pass away like wildflowers. For the sun rises with scorching heat and withers the plant. Its blossom falls and its beauty is destroyed. In the same way, the rich will fade away even while they go about their business.
That's such an awesome way of putting it. While they go about their business.
That's what you see in that Scrooge story. It's just like as time goes by, he just fades away. But in his ledger book is going up and up. Mm-hmm. But his life is going down to meaninglessness.
Yeah.
And eventually, you get to that point in the story where he's seeing that he's unmourned and unloved, and totally a byword. He's a joke. At parties.
Yeah. It's like that. Oh man, who is it? That's that poem. They quote it in Groundhog Day. The wretch considered all himself.
Oh yeah.
I can't remember. It's actually a patriotic poem. It's saying you should be like proud of your country. But then at the end it says that he'll perish unwept, unloved and unsung or something like that. It's like it's not the end that you want to have. It's like the guy lying in the field with his eyes plucked out by the birds.
Yeah, because he didn't respect his parents.
Yeah.
Well, because wealth is deceptive, right? Wealth is of no value to you when you're dead, and it's this whole thing of the deception of wealth is what James is talking about. It's exactly what happened to Scrooge, and so when we trust in in wealth, we're trusting in the deception of that the riches bring, right? And
Mhm.
um, it's the same thing when you oppress the poor. You're trusting in something that just isn't true, that they have no advocacy. And that's what the whole point of this proverb is. It's to say, stop and think about the ends of things before you do something stupid. Don't act like a fool and not take into account the fact that the poor have agency, and that agency is God.
Mhm.
And same thing when you're dealing with riches. Don't think that riches can give you anything lasting. It's a deception, it's a fraud. Look at the long game and realize that relationships are more important.
Mhm.
Both,
Well,
both of these things.
again, going back to our Ten Commandments study, like that was one of my biggest takeaways from how God even structures the commands is that he's emphasizing your relationship and your dependence on him and on other people. That's why the command honor your parents comes before the command not to murder, because it's, it's not even just, okay, what do I do now? And I'm here and we'll start with me. So what's the priorities? It's like, no, you came from somewhere. You came in a context, and you are not this island. No man is an island. You're not self-sufficient. And worshiping mammon, worshiping wealth, is the big lie. There is self-sufficiency. That go back to the intro here in no, you don't have to stand it, but going back to the intro where it's what was one of the focuses of why Solomon's giving this list of wise sayings, so that you can trust in God. Back to the first command. You're refusing to put your trust in God. No, you're not going to give me my daily bread. I'm going to plan out my bread for like the next 30 years. Make sure I don't have to rely on you.
Well, you talked about being in a context that when you're born as a kid, you're in the context of your family. When you're a husband or a wife, you're in the context of your marriage.
Hmm.
And when those things get knocked away, you're rudderless. You're out lost because you're not in that context. We think that we're self sufficient, but we really are so
Yeah.
dependent on other people.
That's
And
like the worst thing we're doing to ourselves in the modern world is trying to isolate from everything more and more. And that's why everyone's so depressed.
well, look what happens to a person when they get isolated, and what James says later on in chapter 1 in verse 27. He says,
Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world.
so right there are the people who are knocked out of the context of family, right? That is what really brings meaning to life, like
Mhm.
Caleb was talking about.
Orphans and widows, yeah, they've
And
lost family.
yeah, they can tell you that you don't have anything on your own, that you're self-sufficient,
Hmm.
because when you get knocked away from those you love and you're by yourself, the world is a terribly lonesome place.
Yeah, technology is like that. That's actually one, like possibly the biggest theme of the Lord of the Rings. Is the whole point of the ring is that it's an attempt to put security in something else, that actually you become so helplessly dependent on that you're not free. Like you're not more self-sufficient, you're less self-sufficient. And that's like our entire economic system is built on that. Like, well, you need to have a 401k so you can live comfortably in your retirement, and you need to have life insurance in case you die so your family will be taken care of, and you need to have car insurance and house insurance. What if this, and what if that, and maybe you should pay me to have more security, huh? Like, what? If I want to be self-sufficient, why would I ever give you any of the money? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, wealth has many uses, and I think that's what James is getting at with this passage about orphans and widows. Because if you do have wealth and you're not using it to help others, then you're polluted, he says.
Hmm.
And that's where the saying of the wise, I think, can be like a daily help to us if we're stopping to remember the hidden agency of the poor. Then we'll remember them in the context of, say, Jesus' statement in Matthew 25, verses 37 through 40, where he says, "Then the righteous will answer him, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?' The king will reply, 'Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it for me.'" And he's talking about a king that's telling that story, which is very similar to the proverb, that we're looking at, the wisdom collected by a king and preserved for us. And the point of that is that the agency of the poor is the king, or the agency of the poor is Jesus Christ himself.
Yeah. Well, and he's also the reason that we do that. He says, you did it for these, you did it for me. Because this can easily turn into a pride thing, a legalism thing. I have to give my money to the poor, check. Or look at me clinking my coins in the coffers like the Pharisees did, And Jesus is saying, you're doing this for me. And I want to compare it with, really briefly, we have the woman who perfumes his feet, right? Who washes his feet. In Matthew 26, starting in verse 8, when the disciples saw this, they were indignant. Why this waste? They asked. This perfume could have been sold at a high price and the money given to the poor. Aware of this, Jesus said to them, why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. That's like so fascinating, right? Because it seems to go against this whole thing all through the Old Testament. And Jesus is even quoting Deuteronomy there when he says, the poor you will always have with you. But the context of that, if you go and read that, is again, well, yeah, you need to take care of the poor. And he's saying, no, there's a higher priority, which is getting back to that whole problem in the prophets where he's stripping everything away, like from that locust swarm.
Yeah.
There's not even sacrifices left to give God. All I have left is myself. Exactly. You should love him first, right? The first command, or the Shema, love the Lord your God. And from that flows the caring of the poor. If you're only doing good to the poor so you can be seen doing good, to appear good in the eyes of other men, or because you think, well, it's like this kind of obligation, I have to check off a thing, you don't actually love the poor.
Yeah.
So if you have to start by loving God to then be able to love the neighbor.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, James 2.
Yeah, James 2, 1 through 13 says, my brothers and sisters, believers in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ, must not show favoritism. Suppose a man comes into your meeting wearing a gold ring and fine clothes, and a poor man in filthy old clothes also comes in. If you show special attention to the man wearing fine clothes and say, here's a good seat for you, but you say to the poor man, you stand there, or sit on the floor by my feet, have you not discriminated among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? Listen, my dear brothers and sisters, has not God chosen those who are poor in the eyes of the world to be rich in faith and to inherit the kingdom he promised those who love him? But you have dishonored the poor. Is it not the rich who are exploiting you? Are they not the ones who are dragging you into court? Are they not the ones who are blaspheming the noble name of him to whom you belong? If you really keep the royal law found in Scripture, love your neighbor as yourself, you are doing right. But if you show favoritism, you sin and are convicted by the law as lawbreakers. For whoever keeps the whole law and yet stumbles at just one point is guilty of breaking all of it. For he who said, you shall not commit adultery, also said, you shall not murder. If you do not commit adultery, but do commit murder, you have become a lawbreaker. Speak and act as those who are going to be judged by the law that gives freedom, because judgment without mercy will be shown to anyone who has not been merciful. Mercy triumphs over judgment.
James coming in clutch there.
Yeah.
That goes back to what we were saying earlier. Like, remember, God is going to judge. He's the judge, and he's also an advocate for the poor. And so you need to act as those who are going to be judged.
Yeah. It just strikes me when I read that is, why do we value wealth above faith? Like, why? Like that example he gives when the guy walks in with the ring on and fancy clothes.
Well, look at what
that's a better person right there.
Yeah. I mean, look at the way we act today when Jordan Peterson or who was it recently? Who was isn't the what's his name? The founder of Wikipedia? Didn't he just recently
I don't know.
come out and now I think he converted to Christianity recently. But we look at any of these. Russell Brand was baptized last year.
Yeah.
Look at these celebrities or these big famous or rich people, and when one of them converts, like, oh yeah, that's point one for the Christians, and it's like, okay, in that time, like 50 people were baptized who are nobody, like, but you
Yeah.
don't care. What do you think? Do you think God values that person's conversion more than
Hmm.
a million poor people's? Like, certainly not.
No. No, we esteem the rich and disdain the poor. I mean, it's like
Yeah,
in our DNA somehow. I don't know why. That's why we have to have a proverb like this that tells us stop doing that.
yeah.
So and it's funny because James tells you, well, isn't it often the rich who are the most ungodly people
Hmm.
anyway? I mean, they're oppressing you. They're atheists. They don't believe in. They disdain the name of God. They disdain you, and yet you're like, oh, look at this wealthy guy. He's fantastic. Well, I hope he joins our church. You know?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, we think like, what's the best that our church has to offer? It's probably like, some really famous pastor, or some big apologist guy with a million books, or like the Pope or somebody like. But I'm sure in God's eyes, it's completely different. It's somebody with no recognition in like Somalia, you know,
Oh yeah.
who's doing his work. Another C.S. Lewis plug. I haven't read this yet, but I need to. In That Hideous Strength, which is part 3 of a trilogy of his. I was hearing somebody talk about the plot of this, and now I really, really want to read it. There's a husband and wife who, and this is kind of like a science fiction series that he does, but they kind of go different ways. This is like a dystopian book. Um, he goes in. It's called NICE. I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but it's like this big world organization called NICE. And he
Hmm.
goes in there, and it's all a power play. The underlings are completely mistreated and looked down on by whoever's above them. They even call them like expendable or something. And he keeps trying to get higher up into the higher like inner circles, and he finds at the end there's just a demon in the inner circle, in the innermost circle. And his wife started going to a church organization, to like St. Anne's church, and she goes in there, and a former servant girl of hers is like the most esteemed person in there. Everybody loves her and respects her, and she's a servant girl, but it's because of her wisdom and her faith. And she's like, "What? Now why is she, honored? She like, cleaned my toilets. Why is she this highly respected person?" It's a complete inversion of God's order, the way God looks at the world.
Yeah. Well, and that's what James is trying to remind us of is the hidden agency of the poor. They're chosen by God to receive the kingdom through faith.
Yeah. I mean, when Jesus came, he didn't come as a wealthy, powerful king. He was born in a manger, you
Yeah.
know. I
Hmm.
like when somebody says, cleanliness is next to godliness. I'm like, oh, why was he born in a stable then?
Not right next to it, but nice.
Oh, it was a pile of dung right next to him. There's actually
Well,
in Spanish tradition, in their manger scenes, there's literally, he's called the caganer. There's a guy relieving himself in the background of the manger scene to emphasize that, like, this
hmm,
is the humility. This is how much Jesus wanted to get down into the messiness of the world. I don't
wow.
I don't think he's there in Luke's account or anything, but
I don't remember it. But Jesus did choose to lead off his preaching ministry, right, with this passage from Isaiah that we read about, the poor. And so it's important to him that their agency is, known. He's making himself known as their advocate.
yeah, well, he became one of them.
Yeah.
Well, that's what my point. He
Hmm.
grows up as a poor boy in a backwater town.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
But we choose the rich every time over the poor.
yeah.
It's just, despite all this.
And James is not even done yet.
No.
He's really on a roll. In James 5:1-6, he says, "Now listen, you rich people, weep and wail because of the misery that is coming on you. Your wealth has rotted, and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver are corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You have hoarded wealth in the last days. Look, the wages you have failed to pay the workers who mowed your fields are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. You have lived on earth in luxury and self indulgence. You have fattened yourselves in the day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the innocent one who was not opposing you." That's like back to the first James passage we read, where he said the poor should take pride in their high station. Like,
Yeah. Well, that last verse really gets me because it talks about how you're um, oppressing the people who aren't opposing you,
yeah,
and so like if you really believe that the poor have no agency, that they are kind of meaningless,
hmm
well, then they're no threat to you. So why are you oppressing them of all the people? Like there's other people who are out to harm you, right?
That
They don't mean you
yeah.
any harm.
It reminds me of a good Chesterton quote. He says, "We're always asking what we should do with the poor, but if we were really democratic, we'd be asking what the poor will do with us." It's like, what do
Yeah.
we do with these people that, because obviously they have no agency. So we get to decide what to do with. But what do we do about poverty?
There's many
We
more
gotta,
of them than there are of us.
yeah.
Yeah. That's a good question. And the only people who are bothered by it are the wealthy people like us,
hmm
the middle class, like you said. All right. So regardless, right, of whether God advocates for them or not, and he does, we should be advocating for them anyway,
Yeah, but we don't.
but we don't know. So yeah, it's a sad situation. But that's what this proverb is calling us to recognize, that if God's advocating for them and he's going to require life for life, then we should be advocating for them. And then again, the blessing on that would be life for life.
hmm
The more life you impart to other people by investing in them, the more life God imparts to you.
Because it's, he talks about that corrosion again, like that idea of if you cut off the blessings, you don't give back to others or back to God, like then it just rots you from the inside out. And he
Yeah.
says the corrosion testifies against you; it eats your flesh. I also like that line: the wages that you failed to pay the workers are crying out against you. It's like,
Yeah.
back to Abel's blood, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, in verse 3, it says that the gold and silver are corroded as well. So
Mhm.
not only have you amassed all this wealth, you're not even using it; it's just sitting there rusting
Mhm.
and rotting away. And why aren't you using it to bless other people? That's what God's calling us to do with wealth. Use it to invest in people. Like you mentioned the um
St. Lawrence.
no the manager, the
Oh, the
shrewd
shrewd
manager.
manager. Yeah.
I mean, he realized, hey, I could use wealth to make friends.
Yeah.
Why aren't you doing that with it? It's just sitting there, rotting.
hmm
So it's a crazy story. So let's wrap up by jumping back to Isaiah 61, because as Caleb said, when you quote the Old Testament for Old Testament times, people realize you're recording the entire context.
hmm
And at the end of chapter 61, or well, later in chapter 61, after Jesus quoted the first couple verses there in Luke 4, there's a passage in Isaiah 61, verse 10, says, I delight greatly in the Lord. My soul rejoices in my God, for he has clothed me with garments of salvation and arrayed me in a robe of his righteousness. As a bridegroom adorns his head like a priest, and as a bride adorns herself with her jewels.
It sounds a lot like the Magnificat. Like, my soul magnifies the Lord, my
Yeah.
spirit rejoices in God my Savior.
Yeah.
For he has regarded the lowliness of his handmaiden. It's like,
Mhm.
again, getting back to that humility and the lowliness, because Mary was poor too.
Well, you don't have to have wealth to be arrayed in righteousness,
Mhm.
to have a garment of salvation. And I think it's just like this language of a bride and a bridegroom. It's like, how do you adorn yourself, Like, allow God to adorn you with,
Yeah.
with salvation and
Well,
righteousness.
did I
but,
bring this up yet? I think I talked about it before the lesson.
Mhm.
Like in Revelation, we've seen how in some of the other studies, the people are given clothes to wear. The redeemed are given clean clothes that are
Mhm.
washed in the blood. They don't bring them.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we want to, if it was our wedding day and God was our, intended, and we wanted to make ourselves as beautiful as we could for him, we would want to be clothed in righteousness.
Mhm.
And that's what he wants to clothe us in, is what this verse is saying. And one way to do that is by providing agency to those who are less fortunate than ourselves, because that's what God does.
Mhm.
All of us are less fortunate, in comparison to God. None of us are like God,
Mhm.
and yet he advocates for us.
Yeah. How would you be clothed by God's righteousness. How, especially with that bridal imagery, like in Ephesians 5, where it says that God, or that Christ, for his bridegroom, the church, he cleansed her with the washing of water with the word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to put on those garments,
yeah.
right, you put them on in baptism.
Yeah, because he has to put them on you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's wrap this up by getting to our wise words takeaway.
Yeah.
We're going from, the 10 words takeaway that we had with the 10 commandments to the wise words takeaway from our sayings of the wise. So this week, the wise words takeaway is provide agency to those who are less fortunate than yourself. And that gets away from, this was one that was a negative, like, don't oppress the poor, So, but instead provide them agency.
And there's always somebody, right? Like, because it's easy to think, well, maybe I'm struggling, maybe I am the poor. Well, there's still going to be people you can help in some way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I remember seeing an interview with a woman who had actually converted to Islam when she was a Western woman. And the person was asking her why, and she said that she had been in a very poor neighborhood in another country, and there was a woman there, a Muslim woman, who was putting aside like the spare change that they had, and she asked her what she was doing. She goes, "Well, this is for those who are less fortunate than us." And she was like, "I already thought this family was as low as it could get," and she's still putting money aside for, in her mind, who's more poor than her.
Yeah, it's like the widow and her mites.
Yeah, that Muslim woman was a better Christian than some Christians are, especially in the wealthy countries.
Yeah, it is an indictment against us when we don't act like Christ.
Yeah.
And do the things that he calls us to do. The sayings of the wise, they tell us that God's the defender of the poor, and Jesus began his ministry by proclaiming good news to the poor.
Mm-hmm.
And now the hidden agency of the poor isn't really so hidden.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the Old Testament. It's in the New Testament. Like we have always said, there's nothing new in the New Testament.
Right.
And Jesus is just repeating the news that God had already put in the Old Testament in the sayings of the wise here. So the bottom line is, if you want to be in communion with God and with other people, then defend the poor.
That's right. Speaking of communion.
Yeah. We
Go to church.
Yeah, we always call people to get into a community of people who are like-minded with you, who want to help you be more like God. And so join a church and find a group of people who will help you defend the cause of the less fortunate.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, that's our first edition of Sayings of the Wise. Hope you come back for the other 29.
Well, we might not do one per saying, will we?
I don't know. We'll see how it breaks down. Well, he's Caleb and I'm Timothy, and thank you for listening to Bible Discussions on Biblocus, where the Bible intersects with your life. Please consider subscribing to our channel to help support our efforts. All scripture quotations, unless otherwise indicated, are taken from the Holy Bible, New International Version, NIV, copyright by Biblica Inc., used by permission of Zondervan, all rights reserved. This program is copyright 2025 by Timothy Klingerman. God bless all of you.